What is the end of the age that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24? This might be a longer one, so I might have to do this in two parts, because there's quite a bit to explain and go into here. It's a big topic, obviously, far bigger than a 3-minute video can cover. So I'll do my best and probably do it in 2 videos. So to set the scene, the apostles or disciples are walking with Jesus by the temple, and they're like, "Oh, look, what such a grand, magnificent building," etc. and all this. And Jesus goes, "Truly I tell you, not one stone will be left on top of one another, and it will all be thrown down." And obviously the immediate question is, that comes from the disciples, and anyone I would imagine, "Tell us when these things will happen." But interesting, they say, "and the sign of your coming and the end of the age." They somehow connect those destruction of the temple and the end of the age together. So clearly they have some background information on in their heads that makes them see that these two things are interconnected. So then Jesus goes into this big sort of monologue of all the things that are going to happen, the signs to look out for, things that will happen to them, like being tortured and sent before people. And this is very similar to what was said in my previous video from the other parts of Matthew in chapters 10 and 16 about all the different predictions that they will be handed over to people, they'll be whipped and lashed, and etc. So Matthew 24 is kind of a reiteration and a sort of another mini apocalypse, as it's sometimes called. There's a parallel account in Luke 21, which basically says the same thing. And Luke's account is gives a bit more clarity than Matthew's in terms of a sort of Gentile Jewish distinction in terms of the imagery and the way it's explained and described. Matthew's audience is typically understood to be a very Jewish one, so he's speaking in very sort of Old Testament terms that they will get, where Luke's audience is usually understood to be more Gentile, so he speaks a bit more plainer. He almost like interprets it, so it's not lost in all the Old Testament understanding you need to have. And so in Luke 21 he says, "Before these things," meaning like all the signs, that and all these things happen, they will hand you over to the synagogues, etc. So it's clearly linked that what will happen to the disciples in the coming years is going to be tied to the signs. The next bit gets really interesting because Jesus starts to connect it with Daniel 9 and the prophecy there. And I'm running out of time on this video, so I will continue that in a part 2. So stay tuned.